To conclude our day, I am delighted to present our esteemed panel on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Moderating this panel is Damien Navarro, the Executive Director of Outfest, one of the only global LGBTQIA and arts, media, and entertainment organizations whose programs empower artists, communities, and filmmakers to transform the world through their stories, while also supporting the entire life cycle of their career. Damien oversees all day-to-day leadership and oversight responsibility for Outfest staff and programs, including fundraising, finance and administration, staff supervision, and external relations. His business and creative portfolio includes award-winning docuseries, as well as national and international advertising, events management, public relations, and fundraising campaigns for several Fortune 100 global brands, studios, nonprofits, and publishers. Joining Damien is an esteemed lineup of panelists, including Brenda Victoria Castillo, currently serves as the first female president and CEO of the National Hispanic Media Coalition. NHMC is a civil rights nonprofit organization that educates and increases the visibility of Latinx from their policy work in Washington, D.C. to their media advocacy in Hollywood, where they collaborate, create, and connect Latinx talent with the entertainment industry. Brenda is an LA Emmy award-winning producer and media production director with decades of C-suite experience in the private and nonprofit sectors and the government. Kibby Anderson is the CEO and co-founder of Wordsmith. Again, sorry if I screwed that one up. A tech-enabled platform for companies to discover and hire new Black and diverse writers. She is an executive leadership coach and an Emmy award-winning independent film producer. Under her KB Entertainment banner, she has developed a unique perspective on how to tell culturally specific stories that resonate with broader audiences. And finally, Liz Pecos is the committee co-chair for the Iatc Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Liz has expertise in social justice and diversity training and chairs several union committees, including vice president on the New Mexican Federation of Labor Executive Board, political coordinator and women's committee coordinator for Iatc District 5. She is also the first female and first woman of color elected to the presidency of Iatc Local 480, which represents motion picture and television production technicians in New Mexico. Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, I respond to all pronouns at this point. So, hey there, thank you so much, Sherry. And just to dive in, I know we're running a bit behind, and there's a few of us that do have some hard stops at noon Pacific. So I was hoping that we can just jump in and start with there. I think for one of the things that's been kind of provocatively questioned by a number of top-level leadership, at least within entertainment, and not also disrupting this change that's happening in both media and technology, is the fact that what is the purpose of having a separate DEI initiative? Why, when in a time where and I've been asked this as an executive director of Outfest, we have specific programs that are targeting our QT BIPOC population, but on the other side, we have also made some major strides when it comes to diversity and inclusion within our traditional programs or our mainstream or tentpole programs. Maybe starting with you, Kibby, what do you think is so important today in being able to say that this is a separate part of an individual's or a corporation or brand's business?
Yeah, definitely. And it's a pleasure to be here. And it's actually Kibby for everybody,
Kibby,
just so everybody knows how to say my name. I'm Kibby. And I'll also share, I'm kind of doing double duty here this morning. I am definitely the CEO of Wordsmith, but I'm also one of the co-founding board members and current vice president of the Black TV and Film Collective. And we are a kind of nonprofit focused on creating kind of networking, training, education, and production opportunities for Black and Brown creators to advance in the industry. So I did just want to say I'm kind of speaking about it from both perspectives. But to answer your question directly, I think it's kind of several-fold. I think the first reason why it's important to kind of prioritize this as a specific thing is for that. I mean, it shows that it's a priority. You know, it shows that you value diversity. It shows that you're willing to put ideally dollars behind it. I think we've had a lot of performative stuff happening over the last sort of 10, 20, 30 years that has made, you know, people within these communities feel continually undervalued, continually unseen. So I think that kind of bold statement saying, I'm going to allocate specific resources and time and people to that is a statement, you know, to that effect, to sort of changing the tides. I think it also creates opportunities for communities to come and provide safe spaces for people. I think sometimes when you're not thinking about the unique challenges or experiences that people from different communities have, it can cause you to not be mindful of creating spaces where people who have those experiences feel, you know, feel seen, feel safe. And I think when you're thinking about retention, especially in today's economy, where so many organizations are struggling with, you know, the Great Resignation, you know, having intentionality around that is important. So I think those are kind of two things I would say. You know, I'll definitely leave some time for the other panelists to give their perspective as well. Brenda?
Yeah. So I would just say we've had so many everything, Kiwi, everything you said, I'm with you on that. But, you know, there's been so many success stories. We have our own writers program, the National Hispanic Media Coalition, and it's nearly 20 years old. And we have a lot of success. One of the examples I'll give you is Sierra Nellis. She was part of our writers program. She went on to NBC's Diversity Writers Program. And now they gave her her own show on Peacock, Rutherford Falls. She is the showrunner, creator, in charge, and her writer's room, she's part Navajo and part Mexican-American. And she made sure that her writer's room was filled with Indigenous writers. So, and we have many success stories. I mean, Selena, the series, hired 3 of our writers for Netflix. Let's see, who else? Oh, we had Olivia, who was at Disney for quite some time, and then she went over to Netflix. We have Leslie Valdez, who's the creator at Nickelodeon for Santiago of the Seas. So they all came from our diversity writers program and went on to networks or streaming services. So there are success stories. So as long as there's success stories and our people are getting jobs and moving up the ladder to showrunners where they themselves are making decisions in the writer's room, I think it's a positive thing.
I completely agree. And Liz, just to take that a little bit further, obviously, I would love to hear a little bit about the Iatc's DEI Inclusion Committee. When did it begin? And what were some of the important questions that you asked yourself before getting either involved or as this is evolving as time goes on?
Thank you, Damien, and thank you. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. The Iatc Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, we were reconstituted. The committee existed in some form several years ago, but we were reconstituted last fall. So we've been around for just over a year, and we have a representation of a really diverse cross-section, not only of backgrounds, but also of our crafts, because Iatc International, we work in film and television, we work in stage, we work in exhibition. So there's a lot that we represent. And I think for today's purposes, I'm really going to focus on the film and television workers. But we've done a lot of really great work, a lot of introspection, and a lot of it's been focused on why we have this moment now, why we are allowed to talk about this, being permitted or given this platform, I would say. And I'm really grateful to be a part of this work. Focusing on the question that you're asking, I really want to refer back to our DEI committee mission statement and equity statement that we helped reformulate for the International, which focuses on what our committee is going to aspire to facilitate a cultural change. This is all about a cultural change that intentionally values a diversity of perspectives and backgrounds and beliefs, and for providing sustainable resources and initiatives and policies that are accessible by all members and leaders, regardless of your background and that are intended to create equitable pathways to success. And something that we need to acknowledge is that while many people have faced barriers to success, there are those that have faced barriers that are more substantial and more entrenched than others. So we need to be able to identify and either minimize or erase those obstacles that are within our control to make a more equitable pathway. And for us, it's going to be focused on unionism, leadership, equitable pathways to jobs within the industry. You know, really a diverse organization can't be established unless those current systems of access are enhanced and addressed. So when we build those structures that create equitable access for everyone and to truly celebrate diversity as well, that growth can ensure that we're going to have a stronger organization, a stronger union, and we all get to benefit from that.
Thank you. You know, the topic of today is disruptors and transformational change. And the first thing that, of course, pops into my mind is a word in which I'm sure many of us have heard and sometimes rolls our eyes, but impact. You know, that back in the day, you know, we've seen this in education, we've seen this in our nonprofit side, you know, particular programs that were suddenly questioned on what they were ultimately providing, whether it was the intended community or otherwise. How are you seeing that word being used in your day-to-day, whether it's working with specific partners, working with colleagues, or even beneficiaries of our particular programs that might have been different than what we saw, let's say, 2 to 3 years ago?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll start. Oh, sorry. So it's unique. It's interesting you asked that question because I'm actually excited to say that the Black TV and Film Collective, we go by BTFC, is actually announcing a merger with another Black kind of powerhouse organization working towards equity inclusion in the TV industry called the Parity Project. So we have a big press release. We've been working on this for a year. And I only share that because A, we're excited, but B, because it's about increasing impact. You know, I don't know how many times you hear two kind of nonprofits that are like scrappy out here trying to make it work, merging and going through the process of combining our collective resources and in collective successes. And obviously our members, we have over 1,200 members on the East Coast, 700 members on the West Coast. So kind of coming together, the goal is to, do more, and I think that's one of the differences today, perhaps versus in previous years. There's a lot of need. And I think that there's a lot of organizations out there working. And I think the more we can come and think about ways we can combine, and make sure that we're not overlapping. I was listening to the panel hosted by the gentleman from the Handy Foundation. And, again, kind of thinking about, hey, how do we sort of work with their kind of post-production crew? Because our focus is around kind of production, development, and then post, so I'm thinking, hey, are there some opportunities there? So I just think the more kind of leadership of these organizations and put ourselves in that, can begin to think, sort of bigger and think about, how can we align and make sure that if we're fundraising ideally to support like bigger initiatives that can have greater impact, maybe national impact, depending on what the overall goals are. That's the great way and the best way to kind of move forward. Our name has collective in it for a reason. We got started because we were frustrated that Black, creators in New York were trying to make stuff and we couldn't get into Hollywood. And we figured, well, heck, let's come together and do it ourselves. And out of that bore, training programs. We have a producers fellowship that we just finished where 8, competitively selected people were given $25,000 to go and make something. Because we know that, having access to credits is a huge impediment when people are trying to advance in careers and move up the ladder. Our combined efforts with the Parity Project, they have an awesome showrunner school that they've been working and doing. And so they're going to bring that in. So there's so many different things, that we're excited to be able to push forward. But again, it's the collective action that we're excited towards leaning into to create greater impact over time.
To create a bigger impact, I think corporate America, who I feel has done little to increase diversity in their boardrooms and among senior management, C-suite positions, the people that make the major decisions on green light projects and whatnot. That's where we need some impact. Companies really need to take diversity seriously and set the tone at the very top. And in order for our nation to be inclusive, we need transparency from corporate America on racial, ethnic, and gender makeup of those companies at the very top in the boardroom and C-suite positions. So I would love to see corporate America, that means entertainment, the entertainment industry, reflect America. Most of the entertainment industry is located in California, where Latinos are more than 40% of the population. A lot of them are located in LA County, where more than 50% of the population, yet they do not have not even one Latinx on their board of directors.
No.
So it's a real shame, and there's a lot of work to be done. And that's where I would say we would receive not only impact, but the process would move a lot quicker if we had diversity in the boardrooms.
Liz, did you want to add anything?
Sure, yes. So talking about cultural change and the impact of cultural change. So for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to come to fruition and actually have to generate effective change and impact, it's really essential to create a framework of support for all those involved, all stakeholders involved. And this is going to be the employers, it's the unions, but it's also those that are responsible for taking ownership of where we are in terms of racial justice in our country currently. So these are policymakers. And without adequate support and policy reform and the trickle-down effect into policy and changes within the workplace, the platform that is currently being offered to those that are demanding equity and deserve equity in the workplace, this is going to fall flat. So we know cultural change isn't easy or quick, and it's not often pleasant. We're resistant to change as a society and as humans. So it's really going to demand that from all those at the front line, there's a lot of resiliency, a lot of courage, a lot of strength to take those steps forward so that this effective change is, and the impact is real. And it's got to be across multiple platforms. So as unions, we hold the fundamental belief that diversity is a strength, and we work inside and outside the traditional collective bargaining process to create more and better opportunities for underrepresented individuals. We can do that by working with policymakers to make policies that are aimed at creating diverse talent pipelines to jobs, by incentivizing diversity initiatives and hiring. And by supporting the collective bargaining process, we can help the workplaces and industries move forward. And then internally, we do a lot of internal organizing. Some of the goals that our DEI committee has developed and is working on currently over the past years is a lot of outreach to underrepresented communities, schools, individuals on pathways to membership. And this is in our efforts to foster inclusivity and also to grow our rank and file. We are working with our internal training department to develop and use existing programs, but to also work with community organizations and people that are already doing this work. We don't have to recreate the wheel here. It's about connecting all of these resources. We want to develop training for members and individuals, but those that are also needing that access to jobs on pathways to membership, the basics of skills, crafts, union structure, purpose, functionality. And then another big element to this is going to be creating a specific strategy to encourage broader participation in leadership. We need to develop strong, diverse leadership. So developing courses to get BIPOC and LGBTQ plus members more involved in the union and pathways to leadership and promoting that kind of training within our current leadership. I echo what Brenda said, that we need more diverse leaders in our boards, but within the workforce in positions of supervisory roles, key positions, director positions. As you see that, you're going to see that trickle down effect where it starts to mirror what the workforce looks like.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that has kind of come up a few times amongst us is this idea of diversifying the way that we reach specific communities, we reach specific audiences, and also develop our programs or continue to evolve our programs that may have been very different than the way that we were approaching early career programming versus sustaining momentum, career climbing programming. Is there anything within your own worlds or cross-pollination of ideas that we are seeing in other places that we might want to be, that you're considering adopting into your own practices, into your own programs, that may be in a completely different industry. I think it's always important to share, and I'm also seeing this in the diversity of talent and leadership that are now running some of our programs or running some of our organizations I come from media and technology, and I'm now running an organization in entertainment, but a lot of the cross-pollination of what I saw working within that space, I'm bringing with me. Is there any particular stories that you were seeing in your own spaces?
I can speak to that a little bit. We're seeing the development of specifically like diversity training programs that make it accessible for the first time really ever for underrepresented individuals to have direct like on-the-job training, so that at the end of the programming, they're going to have more than just on-the-job training, which has been historically difficult to attain for any individuals. But the importance of getting that on-the-job training is people that go through these programs that are being developed is they get the opportunity to learn crafts and skills training, but they also get the benefit of networking and building up the industry knowledge that you otherwise don't get. There's this elusive curtain that, it's a catch-22 to get a job in the industry because it really is on the job training. And I work in the unions, we represent all the below the line workers. So this is going to be mostly for your production folks. And by creating these programs that we're seeing, they started as pilot programs and they're working very well in states like Illinois and New York and a couple other jurisdictions. As we see these roll out, and there's a huge initiative to roll these out industry-wide, we're going to start to see that we can create accessibility for many more people that never had the opportunity to learn about the industry, to learn that these jobs exist, and to lead into what I just previously mentioned, diversifying the workforce, diversifying the unions and rank and file, and giving them that opportunity to learn from the people that are doing these jobs and create their own network. The mentoring aspect is essential to building up that workforce. And then you get the trickle effect of they also can extend into their communities the knowledge about the industry. So outreach is important in creating those pathways, whether it's done through feeder programs or through the diversity training programs that are being recommended in our contracts now. These are all really great things that are moving forward. And I think we're going to see more we're going to see it happening on a more regular basis in all jurisdictions. And as it happens within Iatc, it can hopefully extend to stage and to other aspects of the industry as well, and then hopefully into other countries as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll share a little bit about kind of how we've been thinking about this, and I'll talk about it actually from the perspective of my startup Wordsmith, because when you think about retention in the entertainment industry for writers, there are definitely diversity fellowships, and folks are kind of getting in, and they're maybe getting staffed on a show for the first season, but quite frankly, once that money runs out, showrunners aren't actually incentivized to keep them. And so we've seen from our data and analysis internally within the BTFC that folks are out of work. I mean, there's a lot of folks, who are trying to work within, unionized projects, but they're not able to. And so Wordsmith, my startup, was actually kind of conceived around this idea of like, well, how do we empower writers to see themselves as more than just a writer, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who has a multitude of skills? And I've spent many years working in technology, many years working in kind of media and more traditional corporate spaces. And so a lot of this thinking is coming from there. And obviously the pandemic and the focus around virtual being okay, virtual being actually preferred, and people really wanting to take more control over their lives as opposed to, say, going to a 9-to-5. The whole purpose of Wordsmith is to give kind of writers who may have spent their year working as a journalist or even on television an opportunity to use their skills to kind of provide value in the $40 billion that's being spent annually by corporations on things like copywriting, on things like branded content, on things like corporate communications. CEOs need to have speeches written. And quite frankly, the rooms where those speeches are being written are primarily men and white men, and so there's all of these amazing, writers of color, Black and brown across the country, who are not being tapped into. And so there's actually a need. Companies are like, hey, I need to hire somebody to help me speak to my diverse audience, my diverse consumer base. I don't have enough people in my internal marketing structure to do that. Can you help? And so Wordsmith is literally a place where companies can hire a writer pod that can be intersectional. It could be women, over 60, LGBTQ from the South, and if that's your campaign and that's the audience you're trying to talk to, it's a much more efficient and cost-effective way for companies to actually meet this huge need that's growing, because marketing is changing. Marketing the way we used to do it in the last 50 years is changing. People are not looking at television. They're not looking at 30-second spots. They're looking at a newsletter. They're looking at YouTube. They're looking at social media. So the ability to speak to those audiences in a very authentic and organic way is actually hard. So Wordsmith has really been received quite well, because a lot of companies are finally realizing, oh my goodness, you can help me with my sourcing, you can help me with my curation, and you can kind of help me find voices that I would never have an opportunity to find. So that's sort of another example of ways that we're sort of thinking about this a little bit differently. And writers can actually create a living for themselves. When they're not necessarily working on a show, they can avoid having to go get the 9 to 5 at the restaurant or go to the shoe store or whatever, because they can apply their skills in a way that is necessary. It pays well. And so on the other side of our writing, of our platform is a writing community. So it's a pipeline. We're training people, we're giving them insight and skills, and helping them kind of begin to see themselves more holistically as a writer that has a like a series of kind of tools from there, kind of Swiss Army knife that they can leverage to support companies who are actually spending top dollar today.
Brenda, did you want to add anything?
I guess I would just add that, Hollywood is made up of nepotism and who you know. So I know within our Latinx Dream Showcase and our writers program, what we try to provide is also the networking opportunities, because everybody that's in our program is very talented. They're already good, great writers, but it's meeting and having that connection and mentors. So that's what we provide, because I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important for us to create that space, not that we represent them, but create a space where they themselves can network with the right people in the industry. I think Kibi brought up a really good point. Writers themselves have to be open to other opportunities to write while they're waiting for, their script to be picked up. And I 100% agree with her on that. You can write, I know even with each network, there's a streaming service that contacted us, and they produce about 900 shorts, whether they're ads, promos for their series, and they're asking us to introduce them to Latinx writers, and we're doing that right now. So we're making those connections, and it's very important, the networking opportunities that we provide. That's what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting too, because having played in brand entertainment and in media for so long on the advertising media side, the last company I was running was a company that had 700 filmmakers all around the world that were contributing to brand content 24/7, as we know. And it was so interesting to see how many were either moonlighting or daylighting in their filmmaking endeavors and their creative endeavors and independent content as well. And I think that's something that has been overlooked for so long. And Kibi, I'm excited to hear about the ways in which, I always like to say, getting cash into queer pockets, QT BIPOC pockets, to take it even a step further. It really, like, my impact. That's something that, being able to sustain oneself in this industry is exceptionally difficult. We have seen a lot of people, which I would love to talk about as too, before I get to my next subject, is a little bit of, we've seen, I call it the great remigration of the country, and in which I've seen a number of filmmakers, storytellers, above the line, below the line, go back home, but still are able to sustain themselves because of all of these things that many of our boards and many people said would never happen, which is digital summits and programs that we were able to sustain digitally and from a streaming perspective. But before we get back to the really fun stuff, just to hit on an important and I think very serious note, especially when we talk about programs that are attempting to support young people. Mental health, of course, comes into play, especially when so many of our communities that we come from, both were communities, but also in many cases exhibited and were part of extreme traumas. You know, what are some of the ways that you're seeing, whether it's in your individual programs or other resources that are being made available to create kind of these safe environments, or in our case, when we have fellows that are 16 to 24 for like an outset program or young filmmakers project, that they have these readily available and that they are actually built into the programming landscape itself. Is there anything that you've either anecdotally seen that is really working, or things that you're starting to really take into consideration as your programs continue to evolve and grow?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the BTFC, you know, we are mission focused around creating sustainable careers. And within that, you know, I mean, I've worked as a producer for, you know, the first 10 years of my life. That is hard. Like, it is mentally exhausting, not only because you're struggling to actually get a project made, but you're struggling against a lot of other structural elements, racism, sexism. I mean, you know, kind of insert ism there. And so for us, during COVID, we were able to shift all of our programming online. It provided us a really unique, and I'm so happy, amazing opportunity to layer in more of the mental health support, whether that was providing literally just like, you know, communities where people could just get on Zoom and just talk, you know, and events and, you know, and express their challenges, express their fear. You know, we were able to actually leverage some funds from another granting organization to do kind of mini grants, you know, like $100, $200, just to help people pay for bills, which again, kind of helped alleviate a lot of stress that people were going through at the same time. And as we've begun to evolve and develop our programming, especially for our folks who are kind of coming in, say they're baby writers, and we don't necessarily think about it in terms of age, because our thing is like, you could have never been in the business and you're in your 50, you know, but this is still new for you. So kind of baby writers or baby directors, baby producers, layering in like a kind of mental health intentional component around the education. You know, what is the stuff that they're not going to tell you? And then how does that maybe, how does you having to confront that, like in a pitch, you know, or when you have a phone call with a potential funder that triggers something from your trauma? How do you work through that? You know, what are some of the skills that you can leverage, you know, tools that you can leverage, you know, to help you navigate that? Because I think in many instances, when you go through accelerators and you have these fellowship programs, quite frankly, there's not enough emphasis put on it, you know, and that's what we're seeing, especially for our communities. And so we're like, okay, how do we layer it in? So, you know, we're talking to, you know, social workers, therapists, like maybe thinking about having some of those people actually, you know, not necessarily on staff, but just like as a resource and available to the community, so that it actually feels like you're not only getting the technical stuff, as folks have shared, you know, the networking is just as important for us, but as well, you know, that kind of like community, like mental kind of support, which is oftentimes, I think, even more important than like all of the other stuff, because it's, you know, the stories you tell yourself will determine your success. And if you're telling yourself the wrong story, you don't have enough people telling you to, you know, that, you know, and let's figure alternative messages you should be saying. It can be, you know, the mark of somebody of great not achieving their dreams.
I could speak a little bit too. So the Iatc Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, one of the flagships of our work is our Visibility Matters, or Who We Are element, our campaign. And it's really about recognizing that visibility and making it acceptable for us to really have a platform that wasn't provided for BIPOC, LGBTQI plus individuals to be as visible as everyone else is important for promoting, I think, what Kibi has mentioned, community and accessibility. And in doing this, it's also gonna promote that confidence and build up everything that's surrounded, like you mentioned mental health. And in talking with a lot of our BIPOC members, just their experience in the workplace is very different. And this is not to say that anyone else's experience to make a comparison, but the BIPOC and LGBTQ plus work experience has been challenging for a very long time. So in our Visibility Matters campaign, some things that we've done already is we've been able to rewrite the equality statement into an equity statement, develop a mission statement. We have a Visibility Matters campaign in partnership with our Pride Committee and our Women's Committees to bring attention to our evolving membership demographics. And we have visibility in our bulletin, on our website, and we want to work with public relations and advertising campaigns so that we can feature our BIPOC and LGBTQI+ workers and leaders, and promote this growth and change of evolving demographics in our industry. We're also working to develop a demographic survey that's going to allow us to see who we are and target areas where we can grow and where we need to target outreach and development, so we can really increase the diversity in our rank and file and in our leadership across the United States and eventually and Canada as well. We're also working on creating a really robust non-discrimination and anti-racist policy that is inclusive of penalties for violations, because we also need protection for individuals that have long suffered and have not had an avenue to report or to address it through our organization. And I think that the studios and the employers are also recognizing this and creating training around it, also accessibility. In the last 5 to 6 years, we've seen a lot of movement in the harassment element. And so it's also being focused on on discrimination and protecting individuals that feel marginalized or feel vulnerable, and what can they do if they are in that position. When we've talked about developing a survey, something that we've mentioned is there is amongst BIPOC populations a historical reticence to participate in sharing any information. And what do we do to overcome that? What do we do? And I think this goes back to what I've mentioned several times, which is we're part of a cultural change. And so facilitating that safe space to say that when we participate in this cultural change, you're not going to be exploited. You're not going to be penalized. This is to promote positivity and growth and create an industry, organization, a workforce that is more representative of what we actually look like here in the United States.
You know, just bringing this topic up, I'm just thinking maybe there's a way our organizations, all of us here on this panel, should be working together, because that is an area that I feel we haven't empowered our people. And I think all of us here are actually creators and have been in the business. And I know for myself, I experienced a lot of discrimination and misogyny. And I would have loved to have a place that I could have went to find support. So this is a very important topic. And, you know, if all of you are willing to create something in 2022, I would love for us to get together and create something.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a big part of the answer. And it was so interesting, Kiwi, to hear about some of the partnerships that you're bringing on to extend impact. Obviously, the impact on mental health is extreme and has extreme consequences. And it is something that, again, we had partnered with the LGBT Center, who brought in their therapists and brought in that part of the mental health facilitation conversations, and not trying to do it all ourselves. And I think there was just such a pressure in the past of having to launch another program after another program, bring in these experts. And I think we've all realized that that isn't the way that we truly make transformational change, at least in a short term. As we start to wrap up, I know for a few of us, if a few of you can extend your time just a little bit, we can continue this conversation. But you know, one of the things that I find myself doing more and more is defending Gen Z and my Gen Z team members and colleagues from the generation ahead of me. I do like to say that my role is just kind of a translator of sorts. But one of the things that I really just hold close to my heart with them is their unabashedness when it comes to demanding fairness, things like code of conducts, accessibility, vulnerability from their leaders in ways that I had never thought I would have to be this vulnerable. But when you see that happen, it comes to fruition. And we talk about so much about infrastructure and so much about transformational change, And what I do love hearing is putting real quantitative impact around cultural impact and the cultures we create with these industries. And I think sometimes for the wonky policy people that are maybe watching or that we've all been a part of, that is missed at times. And we sometimes sit back and wonder, why isn't this working? Why aren't people understanding it? Is it a marketing issue? Or is it a programmatical issue? And sometimes it's simply a cultural issue that we haven't prepared ourselves, our teams, and others. Is there anything that you can provide as advice to people that might be watching today about some of those kind of what used to be soft and squishy? They're actually critical and necessary. But is there anything that you can provide advice-wise for those that might be getting into either a particular line of work, considering one of our organizations to partner with, or otherwise?
I want to shout out the Gen Zs because I love them. Shout out, you guys, this generation they're like, they're not falling for the okie doke. They are demanding boundaries. They are demanding vulnerability. And to me, it's just they're demanding that we be human beings, which I think for so many generations, we've been brainwashed to think that we're supposed to walk around like robots and like show up with only half of ourselves in our professional environments, which is completely insane. So yeah, I'm gonna shout out my Gen Zs. Thank you. I appreciate you all for just not settling. But you know, I'm gonna put my coach hat on because you mentioned, I think Ms. Belafonte shared that I do executive coaching in as well. And one of the biggest, and I work with some of the big, you know, kind of studios, streaming platforms, you know, folks who are growing like crazy and having people who are individual contributors now have to lead. And I think it was maybe Brenda or Liz who talked about this idea of we need leadership, not only in the boardroom, but we need leadership, you know, that's diverse, full stop. But we also need just diverse leaders too, you know, who can communicate. Because the biggest thing that my clients struggle with is how to have tough conversations, like just how to give feedback. How do you receive feedback in this 360 world without getting defensive? You know, there's methods, there's, you know, training, and obviously I do a lot of that, but I feel like that's one of the biggest things is as we're moving into these spaces where it's more squishy, where people are bringing their whole selves, and that means they're bringing their experiences, their perspectives, their traumas, communication can be a little difficult. And it requires, I mean, I appreciate you, Damien, sharing how, you know, you've had to move in a way that has made you even feel uncomfortable when it comes to vulnerability. And I can imagine you're probably a pretty like open person, you know, just from the experiences we've had on this panel together, and myself included. But that's what's required, like courage. You know, it's courage to have those tough conversations. It's courage to hear the feedback you may not want to hear, but to stay. Like to not run, to not shut it down, but to stay and do the work to get on the other side. Because when you get on the other side, it's amazing. But that actually is what causes people to not want to move forward. It's just that fear. It's that discomfort, you know, and it's important because without it, we will not be able to make progress, and we just won't. So to me, like that's the biggest thing I would just say, find books on how to communicate, you know, master classes and whatever it is that you can do in your spare time as a leader to really begin to develop that skill, and then obviously begin to teach it to your team.
Brenda, I know that you're.
I'm going to have to jump off because I was supposed to be on a 12 o'clock with Congressman Castro, but I also love the Z, Generation Z, X, and being vulnerable right now is actually a positive thing now. Being vulnerable is a powerful thing now. So I'm glad that they're demanding more of us. And I think it was Dr. Martin Luther King that said, when there's uncomfortableness, that's when real change will be made. So I have to leave everybody. It was great to meet you, and please continue without me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brenda.
Liz, I wanted to give you the opportunity here, and then maybe we can do kind of a wrap-up thing. I'm not sure if we were taking questions. I wasn't coached exactly on how this comes to an end, but perhaps, you know, somebody can put in the chat exactly how we usually wrap it up. But Liz, I wanted to kind of hand it over to you for the topic.
Sure. I love everything that Kibi said on this. And in doing this kind of work, and I'm sure Kibi and Brenda have come across this, and I think I mentioned it previously, change is slow, but it's also not easy. And I think that probably this happens in every generation where you have, you know, the generations kind of locked up against each other, and they say, one is acting one way, one is locked in their habits, and the phrase, old dogs can't learn new tricks. But when we're in the midst of two huge movements, you've got the Me Too movement and you've got Black Lives Matter movement. When you're in the midst of movements, whatever the movement is, there is going to be a wave of change that happens. And we are riding these waves right now. And we need to explore them for all that they are going to bring forth and carry them for as long as we can. And I really credit the younger generation for carrying those through and for embodying them and emboldening us to continue these conversations and carrying it, making changes so that we can have real impactful changes out of these movements. We want to see measurable changes that are not just in our lives, but definitely in the workforce, in our policies, in our laws. And that is really the benefit of movements. And they keep coming, and we're seeing the social change and definitely the schism that is happening between the two generations. I see it a lot in a microcosm in my local, and then in a wider sense in the international and in the industry. And what I see behind people that are not willing to accept it is fear. It's really just fear of changing the status quo, fear of letting go of what people are used to, what people are comfortable with, and what people benefited from, which is this previous system for decades, for their generation. And now that is threatened. And it's unfortunate because we're just saying like everyone gets a seat at the table. Everyone's going to have an opportunity. This is not saying that you have to go out to pasture, older generation or anyone else who's been part of this other system. We're just changing it a little bit. And to facilitate that, I fully agree with what Kibi said, which is communication, creating opportunities for everyone to continue to sit at the table and discuss. A lot of times those moments are going to be uncomfortable. A lot of the times there's going to be disagreement, and there has to be thoughtful discourse. If it can be respectful, it really needs to be respectful. And that is really the only way we're going to get through this. I think there's a lot of very passionate and intelligent and intuitive people that are leading the charge on all of this in our industries and in other industries. So we're starting to see some real progress on all fronts, but we have to continue to chip away at it. And there's the unfortunate thing about it is there's this kind of uprising that's really just not happy with it and creates a lot of friction. And it's continuing to kind of barrel through that using resources that we have available. There's community organizations and nonprofits and people that are there to support industry and unions and employers and great teachers and facilitators that have the material that are there teaching it. A lot of it is about awareness. So there's implicit bias training. There's a lot of training on D&I, that's D&I topics that are being taught in the industry to leadership, to studios, to crews, to across the board that I'm seeing. And the more we teach that, the more we start having those conversations, the more we talk about if you see something, say something, and creating safe spaces, we'll get through it to the other side. But we need to keep chipping away at it.
Amen. That's all I can say to both of that. I mean, it really is, first of all, again, Gen Zs, keep it up, make us uncomfortable. You are coming with some of the best ideas right now. And if you are in an environment in which those are not being celebrated, we are here to help. We are here to be your champions. Please reach out if there is any particular call outs that any of you would like to do before we wrap it up here today. Please let us know. Again, I'm Damien Navarro, the Executive Director of Outfest. Our URL is very simple, outfest.org. We have incredible programs for all stages of careers, and we work both with the allies as well as within the queer space. So please feel free to get a little curious about ourselves and insert that out. I just wanted to give you both an opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been a pleasure, Damien. Thank you so much for your awesome, work here, and again to the county for hosting us. Please visit blacktvfilmcollective.org or blacktvfilm.org. You can find us on social media at both of those handles. Again, we are excited about this new phase with our merger. Please join, become a member. Members get access to an amazing plethora of programming, training, access to money, to a community, all the thing, and the ability to make your project. Our motto is make your work. We're not about waiting, so even if you can't do it in the traditional system, let's do it outside the system. There's a lot of places that are looking for content. So I just want to encourage everybody to get aligned with someone, whether it's my organization, Outfest, obviously the union, Brenda's organization. We're here to support. So please don't feel like you're an island. And then lastly, you can follow me at Kibi Anderson, all one word, or Wordsmith. Go Wordsmith are our handles. So if there are any writers out there who are interested in joining our platform and potentially being put to work, leveraging your skills, in the corporate space, please definitely visit us there, or wordsmith.co, CO is our website.
Thank you. Thanks, Damian. And it was a honor to be here. Like I said, I'm happy to be part of this conversation. I'm just grateful that we are at the point that everyone wants to be discussing this, and we're talking about moving forward and having this impactful change. Just to sum up, just really the diversity, equity, and inclusion for Iatc International, we have a lot that we are proposing, that we're working through, and I think a lot more that we're going to be doing for all of the below the line film workers over the next year and into the future. And big on our list is going to be the launching of this survey, where we're going to actually get a good picture of what we look like. We have over 150,000 members. And we need to get an accurate picture of what we look like, and then working closely with the studios and the employers to figure out how to advance diversity, hiring initiatives, training in the workplace, access to underrepresented individuals to career pathways, and creating sustainable careers for those individuals so they have the opportunity to build better lives for themselves and that trickle effect into their communities. We didn't get to touch on it, but I know there's a lot of policymakers in the room, and if they're not aware, the Department for Professional Employees of the AFL-CIO, the arts, entertainment, and media industries, recently released a policy agenda for advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion in the arts, entertainment, and media industries. And that is a good place to start to look at just what kind of policies would be valuable to start implementing on a state level as well. A lot of those elements that are proposed have been passed by several states, but a big one is really leveraging state tax incentives to encourage diversity hiring. And there's a lot of ways to do that, and it's being successfully done in other states. But I look forward to continuing this discussion and working with all stakeholders involved. We all have a responsibility and accountability for ensuring that diversity, inclusion, and equity are a real part of our industry.
Yeah, definitely. Can I say one thing too, actually, because I think her note to policymakers is really powerful. Advocacy is a big part of our work at the BTFC, and I often say, who controls the data controls the narrative. And one of the things that has helped us make huge events, especially with our sister organization, now part of us, Parity Project, is we literally went and figured out the data as it relates to Black writers working in Hollywood, like literally painstakingly figured out how many people were being represented, how many people were actually working. And that data allowed us to go to the powers that be and begin to advocate for change. So I would also sort of put a call out to any people who are in the policy world, who are looking to maybe partner with organizations like us who are doing this kind of work to begin to put forward policy recommendations. Please reach out. I think about the McKinsey study that the Blacklist did, talking about that $10 billion that's being left on the table. That made a lot of people pay attention, because we could see and we could talk about the real impact in dollars and cents to the bottom line that, the lack of inclusion was having to the overall industry. So we need to continue to do more of that kind of work. So I would just, again, put a call to action out to other organizations, policymakers, data scientists, the like, who are looking to continue to do this kind of work, to reach out to us. We'd love to partner and figure out how we can continue to change the game.
Exactly. And similarly, Williams Institute for the Queer Space, if you're interested in looking at some incredible research and studies that is quintessentially being used as the foundation for many new policies, please feel free to reach out to them at UCLA, and obviously visit their site. They've got just a cadre of different studies and surveys that they've been recently completing, especially around the trans community of color, and others.
Yes.
Sherry.
Thank you so much, Damian. Thank you so much, Brenda, wherever you've gone now into the Netherlands. Kibi, thank you. And Liz, I think, it goes without saying that we hope that the discussions that we've had here today transcends this virtual platform and into policymaking. the cultural change and long-term strategies to ensure our screen industries reflect the people and stories across our diverse nation of immigrants. Given the diverse and dynamic discussions we've had here this morning, it's hard to believe that it's only lunchtime. I'm starving. I don't know about you guys, but I wish to close out today's proceedings by first thanking all of our incredible speakers and the hosts of each one of these elements. We appreciate your time. We know how tough it is to give up a few minutes here and there, although it's a lot easier now that we don't have to travel as far. We just have to pick up our Zoom things. But we really appreciate your time and the commitment that each of you has had to ensure our screen industries has a sustainable and equitable future. Again, I'd like to recognize our sponsors for today's event, which is Amazon Studios, SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, Viacom CBS, the Walt Disney Company, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Warner Brothers, Fox Corporation, NBC Universal, Netflix, and Southern California grant makers, and today's co-organizers, again, with the tongue twisters here, Beacon Economics. The county recognizes and appreciates all the support you have brought to today's event and for your ongoing contributions to LA's entertainment industry. And finally, to the LA2021 Steering Committee, the Beacon Economics team, and our host, the virtual show, for helping bring all of this together. We appreciate your time this morning, and I'm Sherry Belafonte. I hope you all have a great, safe day. Stay safe. Get vaccinated. That's me. I'm just saying that. And have a great day ahead. Go get some lunch.